In late February 2026, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Theory, a coordinated aerial campaign to neutralize Iranian military leadership and defense capabilities. Precision strikes systematically dismantled ballistic missile infrastructure, neutralized air defense networks, and severely degraded uranium enrichment facilities across the country. By conventional military metrics, the operation was a decisive tactical victory. Yet, almost immediately, the attacking nations found themselves paralyzed. Global oil prices doubled to $120 a barrel. Inflationary pressures threatened a worldwide recession, while transit authorities and water utilities inside the United States suddenly went dark. Iran absorbed the kinetic blows and shifted to a decentralized, multi-domain strategy that bypassed American military hardware entirely. First, they established a physical blockade of the world's most critical maritime energy corridors. Simultaneously, state-aligned hackers exploited exposed endpoints in underfunded American domestic infrastructure networks. Destroying an adversary's military installations yields little strategic value if that adversary can weaponize the fragility of the global supply chain and digital economy against you. This satellite image shows the Strait of Hormuz, a geographic bottleneck connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. At its narrowest point, the shipping lanes are just 2 miles wide. In peacetime, roughly 20 million barrels of crude oil transit this corridor every single day. It also facilitates the movement of roughly 20% of the global supply of liquefied natural gas, or LNG. When Iranian forces restricted this choke point, market analysts at Goldman Sachs mapped the potential damage using a specific pricing model. This chart models the price impact of a full transit halt. With zero offsets, the model projects a $15 spike per barrel. Bringing spare pipeline capacity online drops the spike to $12. Coordinated reserve releases trim that increase to $10. Even if half of all shipping is maintained, the market demands a $4 premium for persistent risk. But crude oil can be rerouted through pipelines or supplemented by strategic reserves. Liquefied natural gas lacks that elasticity. A full blockade immediately pushed European natural gas benchmarks towards €74 per megawatt hour. Asian markets, entirely reliant on these specific shipments, are forced into a zero-sum bidding war against European buyers for a shrinking, non-substitutable pool of energy. Calculating spare oil pipeline capacity is a distraction when the inflexible logistics of the global LNG market dictate the true absolute floor for energy prices. Energy shocks do not stay contained within the energy sector. They act as vectors, transmitting inflation into entirely separate industries. This flow diagram tracks the transmission mechanism. A sudden LNG deficit forces immediate production halts at petrochemical facilities relying on natural gas. One casualty is urea fertilizer, which spiked by 86%. Missing harvest deadlines in India and Brazil guarantees subsequent global food insecurity. Iran multiplied this pressure by activating a secondary maritime blockade 2,000 miles away. Houthi proxy forces operating out of Yemen resumed systematic attacks on commercial vessels transiting the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. This secondary chokehold forced roughly 30% of all global container shipping to abandon the Suez Canal and reroute around the southern tip of Africa. Navigating the Cape of Good Hope adds between 10 and 14 days to standard transit times. The extended route requires an additional $1.2 to $1.8 million in fuel costs per round trip. Shipping firms pass those exact costs down the supply chain, permanently embedding the inflated freight rates into the retail price of consumer goods worldwide. Combining a sudden spike in fertilizer prices with an artificial surge in global shipping costs places developing economies on the brink of acute famine. A pair of regional naval blockades creates a structural, multi-sector inflationary shock that central banks cannot fix by adjusting interest rates. While the economic toll accumulates in maritime choke points, the digital frontline of the conflict targets the domestic United States. State-aligned hacktivist groups operating under names like Cyber Avengers mobilize to target American critical infrastructure. Instead of engaging highly secured military networks, these groups targeted the under-resourced municipal utilities that run American cities. Their primary digital entry point is the Programmable Logic Controller, or PLC. PLCs act as the physical translation layer in industrial environments, converting digital commands into mechanical actions that open valves, spin turbines, and regulate power grids. This network topology illustrates the vulnerability. IT networks handle standard data, while operational technology, or OT, networks control physical machinery. The PLC bridges the two. By exploiting internet-facing PLCs, attackers bypass the IT perimeter, manipulating legitimate administrative tools in the system to avoid triggering alarms. This access allowed them to successfully disrupt operations at water treatment facilities and shut down internal networks at the Los Angeles Metropolitan Transportation Authority. The goal of these specific intrusions is not catastrophic kinetic destruction, but high-visibility psychological disruption. Forcing ordinary citizens to deal with failing transit systems and compromised water utilities raises the domestic political cost of the war, fracturing public support without crossing a threshold that provokes an overwhelming military response. The 2026 crisis exposes a lethal gap in modern defense doctrine. An absolute kinetic victory was neutralized by a massive asymmetric economic and digital counteroffensive. This scale visualizes the trade-off. As Iran's conventional military capacity is systematically degraded, we see the resulting surge in global inflation, shipping costs, and targeted cyber intrusions. Restricting maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea choked off the exact energy resources required to keep the global economy functioning. That energy deficit cascaded directly into agricultural supply chains, pushing essential fertilizer prices to unsustainable levels. Domestically, exploiting the fragile bridge between IT networks and physical machinery allowed foreign actors to disrupt municipal services from thousands of miles away. Highly optimized, deeply interconnected global economies offer thousands of leverage points to adversaries who lack the hardware to fight a traditional war. A state no longer needs a sophisticated air force to contest a superpower if it can selectively paralyze global trade routes and municipal water systems. Overwhelming tactical military dominance is structurally insufficient if a nation cannot secure its physical supply chains and defend its decentralized digital infrastructure.